Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. Robert Gill Jr. is an author, publisher, entrepreneur, and business person best known for the Art Molds Journal, a monthly glossy magazine about art and sculpture that he published for 4 years. His latest book, Happiness Power, was released in January 2021, and he teaches us how we can cultivate what makes us happy through a set of strategies and technologies that anyone can master. He is an avid sailor, and he lives in Far Hills, New Jersey, with his wife and their dog, Ginger.
Hi, welcome to our podcast. I'm so excited that you joined us, and I understand that you wrote Happiness Power with Robert Gill Jr., and tell us a little bit about the book.
Hi, thanks for having me, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Well, Happiness Power was a book that I wrote as a result of the COVID-19. Before we were quarantined, I read an article in the New York Times that indicated the article was written by the World Happiness Organization, which writes a happiness or does a survey of happiness annually. So the 2020 happiness report said the Americans were the most unhappy that they've come up with since the survey. And I thought, wow, that's really odd. This was before we had our lockdown. And then as I started looking into it, I saw a number of studies on happiness. That, gee, this is an amazing subject. It really should be a book. And as I started thinking about it, that's when COVID-19 creeped up on us and locked us down. And I said, well, this is the perfect time to do writing. And that's really what started my book on that subject. I just finished another book on real estate. I've been in real estate a long time and real estate investor for many, many years. So I had been pushing that book for a while, and I thought, well, let me take a break and I'll write this. And so I've written, most of my books are written under a pseudonym, Robert Gill Jr. My real name, natural name, is Ed McCormick. Years ago, when I first started writing, someone asked me, what name am I going to use? And I said, I'm going to use my name, Ed McCormick. He said, no, don't do that. I said, why is that? He says, what if the book is a failure? So you don't want to have a failure as a book and then have your name associated with it. So I thought to myself, that made good sense. I didn't know. I was just starting my writing career. It possibly could have been a failure. So I picked out Robert Gill Jr. and I've used that every time I've written a book.
So then after, trying both books, what did you learn the most? What was the takeaway from doing both books?
Well, I'm a natural person who seeks answers because I'm curious about everything that's around me. Let me say, to the extent where I sometimes am in an extreme. For example, about 8 years ago, I walked into my doctor's office and saw 6 people sitting there with their heads buried into their cell phones. They had no idea that I'd walked in. I could have taken the furniture there and they wouldn't have been able to identify me. And I thought to myself, geez, the lack of awareness that we have as a result of these cell phones is something else. So it was then I decided that after I left the doctor's office, I gave my cell phone away to my cousin. And since then, I've not had a cell phone. So that's how quirky I am. But what it's given me is an extraordinary awareness of what's going on around me. And other people say, well, what do you do if you break down and you don't have a cell phone? I said, well, everybody else has a cell phone. I'll just borrow it to make a call. And so I've been functioning without it for all of these years. Now, I don't advise others to do it, but it was been great for me. I run two businesses and my real estate using what is called a landline. Most people forget what that is, but actually it's a means that you can communicate that's very clear, has no static, and you can understand what everybody is saying.
Understood.
And if you want to leave a message for me, you leave it on my answering machine. I'll call you back.
So then let's define what happiness is. Can you kind of shed some light on that?
Yes. Uh, Happiness is a deep emotion that gives us a feeling of fulfillment and joy. It goes back to probably as long as life goes on. It is so motivating that one can almost say that it motivates the amoeba to the elephant, because we are looking to move from being uncomfortable to be happy. Aristotle wrote a great deal about that 2,500 years ago. So it's been written about it for centuries. And in the last 10 years, there's been hundreds of academic studies about happiness, because it really is not well understood. I can quickly say it's a feeling of joy, but it's really much more than that, according to the studies that go on.
So
It's a very interesting concept, because I would say many people feel that they need to be happy, and if they're happy, how do they stay happy? And if they're not happy, maybe something is wrong with them. None of those things are true, by the way.
So then when you did your research and you did your writing, what group seems to be the most unhappy?
Those that seem to look at the glass that's half empty. Those are the pessimists. Those are the people that are either born that way or develop that way through the environment. There are less pessimistic people in the world than there are optimistic people, but it's the pessimistic people who don't get the rewards. It's the optimistic people that get the good stuff.
And why do you think that's so?
Well, you can think about it just a second. Do you want to be surrounded by Debbie Downers, or do you want to be surrounded by hail fellow well met people, who want to buy you that drink and pat you on the back and give you the compliment and talk about the interesting stories that keep your interest? That's the reason for that.
Okay. So then with the whole shift in how people are working from home and then they're coming back to the workplace, how can a company incorporate happiness in its culture due to some of the things that's happened currently in the news and what's happened with COVID and then some?
Companies are only recently realizing that happy workers are productive workers. And let me talk a little bit about that, because first, a number of studies have shown that happy people within their workplace are the ones that get the promotions and the ones that get the raises. Other studies have shown that money does buy happiness up to $75,000, which is, several studies have shown that that we are looking for income. Once we receive up to $75,000, the next incremental amount of income doesn't make us that much more happy. That we get our needs covered, which is fine. After that, then money comes. It's so what? It's like getting the new car, being happy for the 2 weeks for that new car, and then losing that happiness and say, what's next? Or looking at that red car that just zipped by and say, gee, I'd like to have that one. Companies recognize that by having happier, now let me also preface this, that there's a limit to how happy you as an employee should look like at work. You don't want to be dancing around and singing and whistling loudly, because that will put people off. But happiness to the tune of being contented, to being satisfied. That's what we mean by happiness in the workplace. And employees are now tuned into that, because there's so many studies in the human relations area that indicate that you are far more productive being happy than you are being dissatisfied at business. So companies are installing a number of programs, whether it be programs for athletics, for example, putting a gym in a workplace, or adding music in a workplace. Music increases productivity, and interviewing differently and a different style to see that. Also being much more sensitive and aware when people are not happy, or when a supervisor observes an unhappy person. There are a number of programs that are available for companies to put in place.
Do you think that employers should be adding happiness questions inside the interview process?
To an extent, yes. The employer doesn't want to get that far into the personal life of it, but it really should look at, when I was much younger than I am now, and I worked for several Fortune 500 companies. They gave some really detailed personnel tests that really tested the personalities and such, and tested whether one is an optimist or whether is a pessimist. Those are available, but the problem we're having today is the society issues. There's a great deal of sensitivity that has really reduced those types of tests.
Okay, so then understanding that if you interview for happiness, can you tell me the longevity and maybe even the financial implications of keeping that happiness culture and the customer experience in the long run?
That's a good question. Because if we forget for the minute the employee, we can't really forget it. But just for the moment, let's talk about it, and let's talk about the customer. The customer, that's you, and that's me, and that's other people. We're perceptive people. We can walk in to a counter, as an example, and know immediately, without even hearing a word, whether the person behind that counter is happy, sad, grumpy, or interested or disinterested. And we are drawn to the happy customer service person. It's a magnet. And the studies have shown that greater sales are done by people who are happier, have open personalities than those that don't. On the other hand, if we're on the telephone with customer service, we can also tell whether someone is smiling as they're talking to you, just we can hear it in their voice, or are apathetic. So it's important that the first contact that a customer has with a company is with someone who has a happy outlook, or an outlook that really brings in, like a magnet, the customer, and makes the customer feel good too.
Understood. So in your book, you have different chapters: physical health, mental health, gratitude, self-kindness, community, giving, and purpose. And what do you believe is the most crucial element in achieving happiness?
Well, before I tell you that, let me tell you that the purpose of the book was to list the discoveries I found in exploring happiness, that happiness is not just that feeling of joy and well-being, that happiness gives every individual a number of powers within themselves that they wouldn't have if they weren't in a happier state. So when you just listed those things, I've listed over 50 of those powers. And that was the first part of the book. The second part of the book is how do you become happier? And to my shock, I've discovered that you cannot pursue happiness for happiness' sake, because as you do so, you're going to fail. And what I discuss in the book as, well, we want to be happy. So how do we become happy? We become happy indirectly, and become happy from seeking those areas that you just mentioned, by being kind to ourselves, by finding our sense of purpose, by surrounding ourselves with good friends and family, getting involved with the community, volunteering. Oh, nothing is better than volunteering to build your happiness, because not only are you feeling good about the altruism that you're giving, you're feeling good about being surrounded by like kinds of people who are also volunteering. The ambulance corps, the hospital, the community center, the old folks home, and so on. All of those people need volunteers. I was in the Big Brothers for 45 years. My littlest brother was 12 years old when I first joined. He's now 54 years old, and he called me on Father's Day to wish me Happy Father's Day.
Oh.
So that stays with you, and you can volunteer and get that great feeling. And another thing that we all forget, because we are moving so fast, is gratitude. Where we need to seek our own gratitude, to be able to thank others for what they've given us. You know, even just a short thank you for opening the door. If and then finally, not last, but strongly part of this thing is giving. If you practice giving, just by that one act, you're going to feel happier and feeling good about yourself. Let me tell you a story that came about when I wrote this book. This is an ancient story written by a Sufi master that goes back several thousand years, about a traveler who was walking down a road and came across an old beggar traveling in the other direction. And the old beggar had an old sack that he held up to the traveler, and he said to him, I have in this putrid bag, this old bag, this ripped and stained bag, all of my earthly possessions. And with that, the traveler grabbed the bag and ran away with it. And the beggar dropped to his knees and sobbed and lamented about the loss of his bag. But the traveler ran down the road and rounded the curve, dropped the bag in the road. And when the old man, the old beggar, came down the road, he saw the bag in the middle of the road, and again yelled with glee about, I found my bag. Oh, I can't be any happier. And the traveler looked out from behind the bushes and said, that's how to make an old man happy. So the moral is, it's not the things that make us happy. It's how we feel about the things that make us happy. So that's the indirectness that you have when you're looking for happiness, is how you feel about things, right? You can have 400 brand new cars in your garage and not be happy because you're not feeling it.
So then what happens when you know, in today's world with the social media and a lot of moving parts and digital and TV, and there's almost a culture of dissatisfaction and, offense. That's just
social media is responsible for a lot of this. In the studies, they looked at a lot of the areas of social media, and it was interesting that when you are seeking likes on social media, your brain is actually giving you a small little dose of Oxycontin. So every time you get a like, you get that in Oxycontin. So physically, something is happening to you inside the brain. And the more that happens, the more habit forming it becomes. So it becomes such a habit that it's very difficult to break it. And all of a sudden you are feeling you need those likes to feel good about yourself. Well, if you examined it, you would find that those people who are giving you likes, they don't care about you. They care about themselves. They care about what's going on in their lives and not in your lives. And these are phony ways to make yourself feel good. Part of self-kindness, and this is in seeking happiness, is building your self-worth. You know, the young folks don't have a strong sense of self-worth yet. They do that as they mature and get older and feel better about themselves, but they're highly influenced because they have a feeling of non-confidence in themselves. As we get older, that self-worth starts to build, and then we start to see our purpose or our reasons why we are here in the first place. And as we are able to find our purpose in life and our why in life, our happiness explodes inside us, and we maintain happiness a longer period. Now, happiness is not forever. It lasts a certain period of time, and then it dissipates like any other emotion. But if you know how to seek it through this indirect action, you will be happier longer.
Understood. So really it's an inside job.
It is. That's why I said it's not, the happiness is not about things. It's about how you feel about things. It's not about accumulation. It's about knowing yourself, being kind to yourself, building friends. And look, the happier you are, the more you draw friends to you, which, you know, many of these indirect actions are self-fulfilling. Giving also brings more friends and gets you closer to your community. Being thankful, being honestly thankful does that. You could take a stick of gum and offer it to somebody in the elevator, a stranger. That's giving. Just imagine how you feel and how the stranger feels, surprised. But you'll be happy doing that.
Understood.
It's simple.
So really it's about connections and
yes,
and being connected to yourself. And not,
yes. Now, let me also put this in. There's a huge difference between unhappiness and depression. So don't let me point out that people who are depressed, they do need professional help. This is not something where you can help yourself with that. But if you are unhappy or less happy, these are the things you can do. The book describes those items that will get you there. Listen, there are 150 books on happiness on Amazon, and there are many ways to find them, but they're all indirect. And going back to business, you can be a very successful person in business by developing your happiness factor.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great interview, and I appreciate you sharing your insight on your new books. And we will post, some further information so they can find your book.
Oh, terrific! I have it right here.
Oh,
there it is.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks again. It's great to talk to you.
If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.